unfortunately, instead of having conversations with British Columbia about this project, the Premier of Saskatchewan says he was engaged with Premier Smith about this pipeline project proposal. Because of that, in my opinion, Nutrien made the decision to ship out of Washington State instead of out of British Columbia. Premier Moe and I should have been working together on addressing bottlenecks by encouraging the federal government to invest in new rail infrastructure, the Massey Tunnel, bottlenecks to our ports that Nutrien cited as one of the reasons why they decided to go to Washington State. So my concern about this project being a distraction to real projects and real opportunities for Canadians, unfortunately, I've seen that happen once already.
Well, Mark Nixon, let's start with you. Maybe that is the template moving forward before we get into the nitty gritty of the memorandum of understanding that was signed. Just go to the Americans directly and cut out middlemen like Eby.
Yeah, well, why would anybody invest in British Columbia? Let's be honest. Like, are you serious? So what's interesting is Scott Moe dropped I would call the bomb when he said, you're blocking the pipeline because the boats can't carry the oil, but then you're complaining that you're not getting the potash. I mean, it's so contradictory and it's hilarious. One thing that I find quite interesting is that the projects of national interest, and David Eby's flaunting that BC has the most projects of national interest. I want people to understand why BC has the most projects. It's because Mark Carney doesn't have any faith in Mark Carney whatsoever to deliver on any of the projects that should happen naturally. These are not projects of national interest. He's taking over the projects because he's like, there's no way David Eby and his team, the most incompetent premier in Canadian history, is going to be able to pan out on any of these projects. So we're going to take over as a federal government to actually see these projects through. None of these projects should be on the list. None of them. It's incredible. So that's kind of what's happening in BC.
And Carson, what do you make of Premier Eby's comments?
Yeah, look, I think Nutrien chose not to invest money in British Columbia because Premier David Eby has turned British Columbia into such an uncompetitive jurisdiction to do business. Look, nobody wants to invest in British Columbia right now. No one wants to park their money here when there's so much uncertainty, so much costs, and so much uncertainty imposed by this provincial government. Look, we're seeing it from Nutrien now. They would rather do business in the United States where they're not crushed with a crushing tax burden. Things like the employer health tax that punishes businesses for investing and doing business in BC. And look, we've heard it from the credit ratings as well. BC is not a stable place to do business right now because Eby's high taxes and uncertainty are chasing all of that capital away. This is just the latest example of that bad policy, those bad policies coming home to roost.
And you know, Drea, to Carson's point about the high taxes, the uncertainty, and there's another little devil in the details, this ongoing windstorm, if you will, of Aboriginal land title. Certainly, if I was shopping for real estate in British Columbia, there's no way I'm going to Richmond. That's just off the table. But Drea, since you live in Vancouver, what is motivating Eby's comments and behavior in regard to energy?
Well, I'll talk about what I can say rather than what I think is happening there. But we live under a socialist government. When it comes to red tape, we are like the manufacturers for preventing business. We are absolutely showing, on the public world stage that we are not open for business. And Eby is spearheading that. He is a champion, for everything that isn't sustainable under the guise of it supposedly being sustainable. And you notice when he said that, he threw in the Trump tariffs as well, because that's the emotion that he's capitalized off more recently on trying to block some of these things from happening. So I think at the end of the day, we're living under a socialist Marxist government. And so when it's going to see, business opportunities like this continue to be shut down.
Yeah, unbelievable. And guys, why don't we throw to our next video? It's yesterday's woman, Elizabeth May. She thinks this is unimaginable. Here, check this out.
We knew we had a lot of advance notice that there would be some kind of memorandum of understanding between the government of Alberta and Premier Daniel Smith and Prime Minister Mark Carney. But this is simply unimaginable. This is a betrayal of so many different values, so many different agreements, so many different orders of rights and existing Canadian law. It completely sets the stage for the complete abandonment of Canada's climate policy. It is simply shocking. So I will go through in short order major concerns and then be available for any questions anyone has. And I think, of course, you're all hearing the responses from British Columbia First Nations, coastal peoples of British Columbia, as well as Canadians from coast to coast. We knew we had a lot of advance notice that there would be some kind.
Carson, let's start with you. You know what I find incredible when she says this is a betrayal of so many different values? And I hearken back to, it was about 8 or 9 years ago, Elizabeth May, Miss Green, she was in the Victoria Day parade, I believe it was. And the car she was in, it wasn't a plug-in Prius. It was a Dodge Viper with 640 horsepower. I mean, can we even take this person seriously?
Look, and I think the proof is in the pudding there, right? Look, British Columbia, and on a serious note, British Columbia is the center of a national affordability crisis right now. We know that food banks in this beautiful province are seeing lineups longer than they ever have before. We know from surveys, from polling, that British Columbians are laying awake at night, wondering how they're going to make ends meet, wondering how they're going to pay their bills, make those rent or mortgage payments at the end of the month. For a politician like Elizabeth May to go hold a press conference, do an interview where she says she wants to make it harder for British Columbians to make a good living by stalling important investments, by stalling important capital projects, I just think that's unacceptable. Look, we need our economy to grow. We need those gears to get going so British Columbians can have good, well-paying jobs. We don't need politicians throwing more roadblocks and red tape in the way. And I think that's exactly what Ms. May is saying she wants to do.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it, Mark? You know, I find I've covered green demonstrations and the hypocrisy is off the charts. You see the attendees coming by car, not public transit or riding a bicycle. You see them making use of the products of the petrochemical industry, like windbreakers when it's cold, and using technology like cell phones, and they don't connect the dots. This isn't because we have solar panels and windmills. It's because of a robust petrochemical industry. So from Elizabeth May on down, why are we even taking these people seriously?
We don't. Let's put it this way. This video wouldn't exist without oil. That's the first thing. The second thing is just 2 weeks ago, Elizabeth May voted in favor to support and prop up the Liberals. So what is she even talking about? How do you go from supporting the Liberals and then 2 weeks later saying their values are unacceptable? So you can't have it both ways, Elizabeth May. Either you support them, which you did, and now you're coming out with this. It's complete contradictory. Another thing is, imagine this video of Elizabeth May came out 100 years ago, or maybe even like 60 years ago. The problem with Canada is our woke CBC making it acceptable for these people to come out and say these things. If she said the same thing 60 years ago, public opinion would be like, we need to drive this person out of politics, just out of everything, any decision making. But we've lowered our standard of what's acceptable, because think about it. She wants us to be poor. You know, the less money that we have in our pockets, eventually Canadians are going to be burning trash in order to heat themselves because they can't afford electricity. And that's where we're heading with this. So Elizabeth May saying that we're going to save the planet, it's actually the contrary. The less money that you have, the less you care about the planet. You will do anything to survive, including destroying the planet. So it's complete backwards with Elizabeth May. We can't take her seriously, but you know how they are. CBC is going to air her front and center every single day so that we lower our expectations in society, and it needs to change. Like, we can't accept this kind of stuff.
No, you're so right, Mark, but I'll put a little addendum there. She wants us to be poor. She's not going to be poor. You know, as they say, socialism isn't for the socialists. But Drea, I don't understand how, A, we're giving this person airtime, B, how this person, and I think here's where your insight comes into play, living in British Columbia, how does she even get elected? And I go back 10 years ago when she was at that Ottawa dinner. I think she might have been inebriated when she was singing an ode to Omar Khadr and our homegrown Al-Qaeda terrorists. You would have think in a normal world, that's a political career killer. Drea, Humphrey, how does this woman even get elected in British Columbia?
Welcome to the Gulf Islands of British Columbia. I mean, but you know, anytime I need a political pick-me-up, I just watch a clip from that. I mean, that is perhaps one of our most embarrassing moments in history. And like I said before, that's a lot when we had Trudeau for a prime minister and all the embarrassing things we did. But it does make you laugh every time you see it. But I don't know if you noticed this last time we talked, last Friday, David, Elizabeth May was kind of very cocky about it. She was like, oh, there's no way this is going to happen. We have something, you know, the tanker bans. And she didn't even really know what she was talking about. I mean, BC Ferries goes through that area. And well, she was saying it was too dangerous to travel through at all times, basically. But she seemed to have a little less steam there. And she claimed she was going to go through a list of reasons why it shouldn't happen. I have a list of reasons why it should. It's just really quick. And I think it's important to say it's from the Business Council of British Columbia. And they just did 5 quick points about why this should happen. Number 1, it removes an overly restrictive and unrealistic emissions cap on the oil and gas sector. Number 2, it sends a strong signal to global investors that Canada is open for business and serious, which we so desperately need, especially in British Columbia. Number 3, it supports trade diversification by strengthening Canada's ability to get resources to non-US markets. Number 4, it reinforces a more pragmatic approach to environmental policy by balancing emissions management with goals with economic realities, which is something we don't like talking about in any way, shape, or form in British Columbia. What is reality? And number 5, it strengthens Canada's economic base, helping create high-paying jobs and generating the revenue needed to fund critical public services. So that right there is so much reason for this to go through. Don't listen to Elizabeth May.